Howdy, y'all. Frederick here. I've been getting a lot of questions over on Facebook and TikTok. One of my pages over there. I've got two or three pages over there. A lot of questions concerning the basses that I've been playing here of late. First, three of the questions that I've been getting the most of is why all of a sudden I switched to fretless bass, which I didn't really, but kind of, sort of. What are my 6 and 7 string basses, which I am primarily known for playing tuned to, because everybody noticed that they are a little bit lower frequency, and why I don't hardly play 4-string anymore. Well, let's start with that last question first. Today's music almost calls for either a 5-string bass or a 4-string bass with a drop D tuner on it. I actually use both, but I have to admit, here lately, over the last, probably 12 or 13 years or so, I've been doing a lot of 6 and 7, 6-string bass primarily. 7-string bass I've been doing since 2019. And it's just one of those things where I'm a lot more expressive. My 6 and 7-string basses are tuned. Well, the standard tuning is B through C on a 6-string bass, and B through, I think it's F on a 7-string. But the problem that I have with that is I'm nobody's guitar player on bass. Now granted, I have been practicing and training myself or retraining myself on piccolo bass here lately, which oddly enough was the instrument I started out on way back in 1977. But I'm not a guitar player on bass. I'm far from the caliber of Victor Wooten, Marcus Miller, Jaco Pastorius, or anybody else that plays guitar on bass. I'm not that guy. I'm strictly a rhythm guy. And quite honestly, the thought of playing solos on bass terrifies me to no end anyway. I'm not that good at it. I'm not a melody maker. I'm a rhythm section guy. So there's that. I said my 6 and 7 string basses, to answer that other question, are tuned to F sharp through G on my 6 string and C on my 7 string. I've always been that man who liked the lower spectrum of the bass guitar rather than the higher spectrum. Like I said, I'm no guitar player on bass, so that's why that is. And as far as this beast goes, my fretless bass, this is actually the very first fretless bass guitar I've ever owned. Legitimate fretless bass. I have had a few Fender P basses in the past where I've yanked the frets out of them, sanded the necks down, and called myself trying to play fretless bass on those. Wasn't the same as this. This is way different. And the funnier thing about that is playing fretless bass guitar is also way different than playing an upright bass. I've got probably about 25 years of experience on an upright bass, but no experience, or at least not up until this last year, on fretless bass guitar, and not playing it consistently. But, and a lot of people would say, well, there's no difference in playing a fretless bass guitar versus a upright bass. No, there is a huge difference. Number one, you're playing horizontally, not vertically. And the only thing that's similar is the tuning of the strings. I happen to have a 4 and a 5-string bass that are upright basses, electric upright basses. The 5-string I've used on this channel primarily. My 5-string, but my 4-string is just as just as good. I just don't really play it that much anymore. But upright bass versus fretless bass guitar, it's totally different. I mean, while the strings are tuned the same, the fingering is different. The board markers are a little bit further spaced out on an upright bass versus a bass guitar. You know, I mean, I guess basically what I'm saying is you can't go into a fretless bass guitar with the mentality of playing an upright bass. It's not the same. It's not nearly the same. Now, fortunately for me, while I thought at first the learning curve was going to be rather steep, it wasn't at all. I found it pretty easy, and I got to admit, this little beast is a lot of fun to play. I can get very, very expressive on this thing, as you've seen in most of my YouTube videos recently. Most of my recent ones. I use this thing a lot. Not intending to, but, you know, this one is my go-to 5-string these days, you know, when I want to do something different. And you know, and it's also another thing where I have a couple of big time heroes that were in the music business. Unfortunately, they're not around anymore. But if they were, I think they would probably tell me what they have been saying for years. One of my biggest heroes is the late great Miles Davis. Oh God, I love Miles. I loved his music, but more than his music, I loved his philosophies about music. You know, and there was one thing that he said that, you know, I heard about some, I don't know, 30, 35 years ago, maybe longer than that. Right when well, yeah, actually it was longer than that. It was like in the early 70s or mid 70s when I started figuring out, you know, what I wanted to do with music when I started playing piccolo bass. He said that if you want to stay relevant in music, you've got to be all about change. Change it all. Change everything. Change your look. Change the style. Change the instruments you're playing. Change everything. Now, this bass, you know, and I'm probably one of the rare people that do this, but I use round wound strings on this particular bass, which gives it an altogether different tone and altogether different feel. And, you know, I don't know, it just feels right. I mean, to me, flat wound strings are used for upright bass. That's it. Cut and dried. That's it. That's that. And that's all. I don't believe in using flat wound strings on bass guitars. I used to at one point, but see, when I started back in the 70s and then got my first real bass guitar in 83, you know, back in the days where thumb slap and popping and all that stuff was popular, the flat round strings don't cut it. It doesn't cut it. There's no punch, there's no pop. You know, flat wound strings, yeah, try saying that 5 times fast, to me are used primarily for country music, blues, and maybe slow rock and R&B ballads, and maybe to a degree some jazz. But to try to play funk music on it, yeah, no, not happening. I mean, I've heard a few bass players like the great Bobby Vega pull off funk on flat wound strings, but he also uses a pick, and he has a technique that, as far as I'm concerned, is second to none. Yeah, I mean, you know, that guy's probably one of the best flat pickers I have ever seen play the bass. Boy, is badass. But anyway, yeah, I mean, I have fun on the fretless bass guitar. You know, another one of my heroes was another late great one, guy by the name of Jack Bruce from Cream. God, I loved his playing style. That dude, I mean, yeah, what could you say? He was one of the best I've ever seen play fretless bass, along with other fretless bass players. And no, I'm not going to include Jocko in it because he wasn't one of my favorites. He played guitar on bass. I like guys that can hold down that rhythm section. That's what I look for. Who's got that groove going? Who's got that groove going? So fretless bass players like Tony Franklin, Tony Levin, Jack Bruce, those guys, Pino Palladino, especially him. Whoo, that dude is a monster. That's what I like to hear, groove. If you can throw some punchy little accents in there on top of that, yeah, great, fine and dandy. Go for broke, do what you do best. But groove. And as a bass player, no matter what you do, always remember, just groove. I recall about 15 years ago, I was at a jam session, and there was this guy who was a renowned 7-string player. He tuned his standard B through F. And he got up on stage at this jam session on a 5-string bass. And he just slapped, popped, tapped, two-hand tapped, and just killed his way through three jazz songs. Boy, was a bona fide badass. And I'm looking at this guy playing. He's doing everything with this bass guitar but eating it. And I'm next. I'm standing there thinking out loud in this crowd. I was like, now how in the hell am I supposed to follow that? Fortunately for me, another well-known bass player was standing next to me, and he heard me thinking that out loud. And he looked at me and he said, Frederick, look, let me tell you something, man. You got all these motherfuckers in here playing this jazz stuff. And he's like, don't nobody care about that. You notice how the crowd reacts when you get up on stage. I'm going to tell you why that is. Because you have a great sense of groove. Even if you don't know the song, you figure it out on the fly half the times. He said, make no mistake about it. You are a great bass player in your own right. Don't worry about what those guys are doing. You just do what you do. And I took that to heart. To have this guy who was a multi-instrumentalist anyway, I mean, bass wasn't his only instrument. To have him stand there and tell me that, I'll tell you what, the rest of the night was mine. The heck with what that guy did. The rest of the night was mine. I floored the audience after that. So sometimes all you need is a little inspiration too. Against all the odds, when you feel like, oh shoot, how am I supposed to do this? Don't worry about what the other guys are doing. You do what you do. This is that wisdom that I impart on all bass players. Or all aspiring bass players. Don't worry about what everybody else is doing. You do what you do. And you do what you do best. There is a reason why you are the best at what you do. Whether you are a novice or that seasoned pro. Always remember, do what you do best. Don't lose yourself in the moment. Did I just make a reference to Eminem? No, but anyway, that's it. Maybe I'll get on here and do a Couch Jam video a little bit later on. I'm not sure yet because I don't know what I want to try next. And that's the whole idea behind the Couch Jam, by the way. I get asked that a lot, too. I'm getting up there in age. I don't gig on a regular basis anymore like I used to. I'm happy with just maybe once a month gigging. But sometimes, like here over the recent months, I get a little antsy. I feel like I have to be out there on stage doing something, wowing the crowds, pleasing the audience, playing music they want to hear. Don't always get to do that. So when I feel that need, I put together about 2 years ago this I call the Saturday Couch Jam First Take. And what that consists of is me trying out material that I either haven't played in a long time or never played before, listen to it once, maybe twice, and see if I can nail it on the first take. Thus, the title of the series, Saturday Couch Jam First Take. See if I can nail them on the first take. So please forgive me for all the mistakes that I make, because I know I make a bunch of them. But for the most part, I nail it. That's the other thing about, not just being a bass player, but being a musician in general. You have to be a good listener. Listen to what's going on. Don't just hear it. Listen. Pick it apart in your head as fast as you can. Know your fretboards. Know where you are at all times. Which is another reason why I found it a little bit difficult at first to play a fretless bass, because except for these tape marks I have on the neck here, as you can probably see, I have no reference points on this thing. None. Those little small dots on the side of the neck, I can't see that. Even with my glasses on, I can't see those. So, pick it apart as quickly as you can. Figure out your root notes and then go from there. All songs are basically 1-5-4 or 1-4-5 anyway. You'll figure it out. Know your fretboard. I remember another great musician, another hero of mine, John Coltrane. John Coltrane said this: learn your instrument. Learn music theory if possible. And then forget all that bullshit and just play. Exactly. Play from here. Anyway, that's hopefully I've answered all questions. If not, hit me up. I'll be glad to answer any and all questions about music in general. And that's the other thing too. Music is music. It all came from somewhere. Don't limit yourself to any one style. Be versatile. Be able to play it all. Like I said, I'm not that one that limits myself to any one or two genres. I'm black, so naturally I get put into that category of having to play jazz or R&B. Well, I can do that just as well as anybody. But I'm also not afraid to put on a 10-gallon hat on my 5-gallon head and a pair of shit kicker boots and play some country music, or stomp on a distortion pedal and get completely ratty with some heavy metal. I've done it all. I've been playing now since 77. I've been teaching myself. Finally picked up my first bass guitar in 83, and the notes finally came in 85. So I've been doing this for a long time, 40 years. I've been playing music live. 40 years, since 1985. That is a long time. It's like I'm almost 62 years old now, and I still don't find a dull moment playing music. I still enjoy it as much now at 62 as I did when I was 22. That's when you got a good thing going, is when you never get tired of it. It never gets old. There's always something new out there. There's always something to be learned. That's why I push myself. That's the other reason why I went to 5-string fretless, and now here recently back to piccolo bass, even though it's been almost 50 years since I've played that. Never stop learning. And here endeth the lesson. This is Frederick. I'm out.